It's honestly odd to say that I'm having such a cozy night reading Junji Ito. I wouldn't put cozy and Junji Ito in the same sentence. Never. But I'm having like the coziest time. Got some Halloween ambience on the telly. And this was like a really good collection too. And it's a little bit reminiscent of how Love Sickness had a recurring element to it by having the first 5 stories as part of a bigger narrative. In Dissolving Classroom, apart from the final 2 stories in this collection was pretty much about 2 of the main characters who are on the cover here. We have Yuma, who is the big brother, and Shizumi, who is the younger sister, and they are orphaned, and they go from place to place, wreaking havoc. And it's so interesting because I didn't read the summary of this first, so I didn't really know what to expect going into it in terms of the dynamic between the brother and the sister. But the brother is, well, what he can do. So he apologizes profusely to people, and eventually their brains start to melt. Oh yeah, so in the first story, Dissolving Classroom, and he does it throughout the entire story, but in the first chapter we are introduced to the idea that whenever Yuma apologizes to people, and he apologizes all the time, just non-stop, I'm so sorry, it's my fault, I'm so sorry. Even if he hasn't done anything right there and then, he's just apologizing. And eventually it does melt the brains of the people he's apologizing to. And in the first story, he is a new student somewhere, and there is a girl character who ends up taking pity on him, and she even starts apologizing too after his little sister is like, I want your brains, and causes a car accident for her. And she is so nice, like she even tries to help and befriend him and stop him from being bullied. But then yeah, pretty much everyone in the school, just one morning, their brains just start melting, and that girl does end up escaping barely with her life. And she does come back in a later chapter too, which I thought was really cool. But after the encounter, some of her brain is melted and she isn't quite the same, and she is struggling to speak and to move properly. So like that was very interesting, and to see the consequences of something happening in the first chapter continuing through, that was pretty cool. But just the whole imagery of like all the students falling with all the brains coming out. But also I noticed something, these bullies, right, when they collapse, he has just put his hand on his arse. Like as they collapse, it's just like, okay, let's cop a feel as we die. So I'm just like, was there a story there? But yeah, she manages to just escape, and it's disgusting graphics. In fact, one of the reasons why I really enjoy this story is because I think the cover is absolutely awesome. And it does turn out that Yuma, well actually, first red flags when he was talking to the girl who escaped, when he said, oh, I used to kill small animals when I was younger, and now he just apologizes all the time. That isn't the full story, but even just hearing, oh, I killed small animals as a child, huge red flag. Serial killer right there. Serial killer. The Junji Ito characters are never really all that smart, to be honest. But, you know, it's still endearing that the girl character in this was very, well, she reached out to him and she was a little bit protective, even though he is essentially the devil. Well, he's not the devil, but whenever he apologizes, he's apologizing to the devil. And it was absolutely sick as well to say the skulls of his parents. Like, that is genuinely upsetting. And I thought after this, because the second story, Dissolving Beauty, was the same kind of premise, but instead it is Yuma and he is given compliments instead. So the main character in this story, Neo, she meets up with her old friend Meiko, but Meiko is so different. Her face has changed a lot. It looks ugly. And she's like, why do you look so ugly? Well, she doesn't say that outright, but she notices the change. And Yuma, her boyfriend, is non-stop complimenting her, saying, you're the most beautiful person, you are gorgeous, sexy, amazing. Not exactly sexy, but like he says pretty as always. And it's the compliments that make them turn ugly. And so he ends up focusing his attention on Neo, and he says, your beauty is exceptional. And then they end up getting together. So Meiko ends up dying. He is profusely apologizing to her. So obviously, like, she must have melted. Her brain must have melted. But then you start to see a change in Neo. So she starts to look like this. And she doesn't even really realize it because his compliments are giving her hope that she is the most beautiful person in the world. And again, this is sort of all for the devil. Ever since he summoned the devil when he was little, he's been super busy apologizing to it and praising it. So he's actually praising the devil when that's happening, and it's not actually her. She's just in the way, and it's some sort of like, what is it, like electromagnetic wave between him and the devil, so anyone caught in the middle gets the brains melted or their face wrecked. It's honestly so odd because Shizumi, his little sister, she is the one who's like outwardly terrorizing. She's the one who's like outwardly crazy. And Yuma is the one who's so polite and nice. And he is the one who is the devil, well, talking to the devil, conversing with the devil, but he is like a devil on earth by melting people's brains. And it's like, I don't know how to take him. Like, he's so annoying. Like, seriously annoying, because it's so hard to put into words his character, because he seems so apologetic, like, genuinely, but he just keeps doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it, and so many people are dying because of him. He's just so annoying. I really enjoyed this panel here when he's praising Neo again, but the devil is right behind her, but then bless her at the end. Ugh. Oh, that's awful. Dissolving Apartment was the third story. They just move again to an apartment building. And this one had the introduction of the parents, actually. So he is able to bring them back, even though they're dead, like through their skulls or the heads that he's preserved. And he gets them to come back to life and starts the process all over again of like melting them, bringing them back to life and stuff. The apartment building, the people in the apartment building, are affected by it. So essentially it's like kind of pretty much the same instance of what happened in the first two stories. They get apologized to a lot. They try to explain what's going on, but it's like so weird. And I do feel bad because, you know, they are just normal people and they want to help. And they think that the parents are abusing their children, but the parents are dead even though they're there. They're actually dead. I feel like I'm repeating myself here, but it is just odd. And it's just so desolate by the end of it too, when they all just like die. It's honestly, it's bleak. It's very bleak, but I enjoyed it. The fourth one is Shizumi in Love, and this one is a little bit different because the main focus on this one is Shizumi, and she does end up liking this random boy she meets. Like, she licks his face, which is, again, very grim. Don't do that. But they decide to kidnap him, and she wants to be his like girlfriend forever. And that is, I mean, at least she's tried. At least she's really tried to doll herself up for him. Like, I do feel like he should have appreciated it a bit more than he did. I mean, I know they just killed his parents and he was being held against his will, but she made some effort, you know? She made some effort. By this point, I was kind of rooting for Shizumi to get a boyfriend, settle down, and like stop being weird. But no, the boy does end up escaping, which is good. And also the slime, the brain slime and stuff, they've got bottled up and it can sort of talk, and it kind of haunts Yuma and Shizumi from here on out, which I think was so good. It was good. It was good. Interview with the Devil is the fifth and final story with those two siblings, and it has the girl from the first one who had some of her brain melted. She goes back. She can actually locate him because of the partial melting of her brain. It's almost like she now has this like connection with Yuma, so she can find out where he is. So this one I enjoyed more than the previous two stories because the plotline was really ramping up. The media was getting involved, and you know, there was a journalist going after him, and it just felt like we were getting to a really desperate resolution for the two main characters. Like, they were running scared, they didn't know what to do. Also had to get rid of the parents' skulls too, which was great. But then they end up turning themselves in, and they end up doing a press conference in front of the whole world. I'm so very, very sorry. I regret it from the bottom of my heart. And obviously everyone who's watching, they have their brains melting. And the poor girl from the first one, I was rooting for her. I was really hoping she'd survive. She's been taken there by the journalist who took her to the house in the first place. Turns out he is the devil, I think, because he like transforms into this monster. I don't know if it's partially in her mind or if he was actually the devil all along. She ends up becoming brain juice. Ugh. It's so awful. But it seems like at the end he gets his comeuppance when all of the brain juice and I guess the souls of the people who they've killed comes back for them. At the end, the devil always wins. And I love that bleak ending of it. So I really enjoyed that story. Very odd. It's just the whole thing was odd. So then there are two really small stories after this. Like, I'm really talking just 6 pages each. And the first one is of a man who I think it's either his wife, his girlfriend, his fiance. I don't really fully know. But she dies in hospital and she says, I'll come back to you, I will. And he is looking everywhere for her because he thinks that she's going to be reincarnated. So he's looking around. And then there is a random like meteorite, and there were human remains in the meteorite. There's the engagement ring in the remains. So the idea that maybe after death we are in meteorites in the sky, like in space, like floating in space kind of thing. Like that's where our bodies go, or like our souls go. And I think that's like a really interesting concept actually. I do wish we explored that a bit more, but because it's such a short story, it's really hard to rate. I gave it a 5 out of 10. I love the concept. I just wish we got more. A good idea, I think. The last story I think was a little better as well, Children of the Earth, which I gave a 6 out of 10. This one is like a whole bunch of middle schoolers disappear on a school trip and the parents go out looking for them. They find them in this like muddy place, and when they try to take them out, their bodies sort of stretch but they can't get them out, and then they let go and they go down the hole. And to this day, which I think is the reason why I gave it a 6 out of 10 and what unsettled me, yeah, the holes went deep into the earth. The children were never found again, even though they went down that hole, and yet they were never found again. Like, that's fucked up. That's a little bit scary. Like, where does that actually go? It reminds me a little bit of the enigma of the origami fault story. Just very, very bizarre, that ending. And just like, how? Why? How did this even happen? You know what I mean? Like, I'm left with so many intriguing questions, but also just the imagery of these stretched bodies. They look like worms, almost. It's like the children are now worms and they're going into the ground, like how worms kind of burrow their way through. Do worms burrow? I don't think they burrow exactly. I think that's rabbits. But they go into the ground, leaving their holes behind kind of thing. It just... body horror. That's what I'm saying. Like, oh, it's awful. But also just awful the fact that this is all children. Like, breaks my heart. It does. It breaks my heart. So overall, the volume gets a 6.36. I think because it had quite few stories in it, that kind of helped the overall rating and puts it above other collections that have more stories.